This is Marco Reus.
This is Shinji Kagawa.
This is Nuri Shahin.
Hello, this is Jadon Sancho.
And you're listening to the Yellow Wall podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 507 of the Yellow Wall pod. I'm your host Stefan Butzko, and today we will look back at Borussia Dortmund's 2024-25 season in general. For that joins me Matthias Zug. Hello Matthias, how are you doing?
You know, Stefan, I am doing quite well. I am glad that both Borussia Dortmund and Preußen Münster didn't ruin my last weekend. And so, and who knows, maybe Tottenham will not ruin a Wednesday, but, you know, odds are they will.
Right. So Lars and I were already quite celebratory about Borussia Dortmund's qualification in the Champions League and the amazing run-in they had with, I think it was in the end 7 wins in a row or so. But Matthias, unfortunately, the overall season wasn't just all roses and daisies. So unfortunately, we will have to talk about the season a little bit more in general terms. However, it's not yet time for the Yellow Wall Pod Season Awards because that is next week. So before anything else, please send us your categories for those awards on YouTube in the comments or at me on Twitter or Blue Sky, my full name, or I think that's probably the best way to reach us nowadays. But Matthias, back to business. So here are the naked stats. Borussia Dortmund have managed to finish in 4th place in the Bundesliga with 57 points, which is the worst league season record since the Peter Bosch/Peter Stöger season. It was a DFB-Pokal second round exit against VfL Wolfsburg, and in the Champions League, with the introduction of the league phase, Dortmund had to go through a knockout phase, playoff against Sporting, won the round of 16 against Lille, and then in the quarterfinal, they crashed out against Barcelona, mostly due to that 4-0 loss in the first leg, since Lars Ricken has not been tired of saying that the 3-1 win was his personal highlight of the season. Which again we can also discuss in the season awards next week. But I guess we can start by ranking the individual competitions out of 10. And Matthias, why don't you start with the Bundesliga, which is I think still the most important competition.
Yeah,
I've rated it 4 out of 10. Usually I would have said 3 out of 10 because it's been a really disappointing season, but the fun I've had and enjoying the run-in the last part of the season and the euphoria, I'm upgrading a little bit because, I think the fun factor in the end, and maybe the recency bias, let's be honest, is factoring into my rating. How is yours?
If I was going to go out of 10, I'd probably say 4 is about fair. Kind of coinciding with the place in the table and the fact that you had to do it on the last match day. And the reason why I would also go with 4 out of 10 is because it didn't have to be this way, Stefan. It really didn't have to be like this. Why you play me like this, man? It's the... You know, there's that meme where someone's riding a bike and then they put a stick in the spokes of their own wheel and they fall down. That was basically Borussia Dortmund this season because of the unforced error of hiring Nuri Shahin and his team of fanboys. It's great, cheer us on. And we all love Lukas Piszczek. We all love Nuri Shahin. And my opinion of Nuri Shahin, the player, has not been altered by the fact that he's not cut out to be a Dortmund coach yet. Who knows? Who knows what the future brings? That was the unforced error that I think if we're honest, the majority of us looked at that and went, "You sure about that? Like, really? Okay." Because in my opinion, Edin Terzic was more qualified than Nuri Sahin because he had more pedigree as a coach, given kind of his learning curve as a coach. And Nuri Sahin, yeah, he tried some stuff. It didn't quite work out. Let's put it that way. But I'm not even putting the blame on him. He was put in that position. And what I probably would have said Dortmund would have had a 5 out of 10 season had they not stuck with him after the winter break. That was the one where I really went, so you just don't care? Like, you're not playing for a draft pick, right? This isn't the NFL where if you have a crap season, you get a consolation prize at the end. That's not how this works in the Bundesliga. And that's really where, for me, the season hinged and kind of fell apart.
It's funny, little aside. The highlight of the 76ers season was actually the lottery party that my wife and I attended here in Philadelphia.
Fair enough.
So the background is that had the Sixers pick fallen to somewhere between 7 and 9, it would have went to OKC, who are obviously currently playing really well in the NBA, as they just taken game 1 in the Western Conference final. But that's besides the point. Like, the euphoria and hype and just general atmosphere at that venue when the Sixers not only kept their pick but actually went up to 3rd overall. So screw Dallas for getting the number 1 overall pick. But like I said, it's an aside. But yeah, it's interesting to have this sort of US sports. You get rewarded for losing versus in the Bundesliga or in European sports in general, you are doomed to not fail, or you're doomed when you fail, because the downward spiral can be very unforgiving. I think I've talked about it a lot. But Matthias, before we talk more about the Bundesliga season, and I take full blame here, let's continue with the ratings real quick before we talk a little bit more about the eventual errors. So DFB Cup, I gave it a 2 out of 10, graciously, but I think it is more of a 1 out of 10. The grace I gave Dortmund is because of the injury crisis they had at the moment, but we can also talk in a moment about how that was self-inflicted. But I think a second round cup exit is not where Dortmund wants to be. Granted, it was against the Bundesliga team and away from home. But yeah, the German Cup experience was not fun whatsoever. It was horrible. Where do you land on this?
Yeah, I'd give it a 1 out of 10. I mean, yes, of course, injuries played a very key role in that match against Wolfsburg, but this was also at the time of the season where Dortmund were arguably in that tailspin down, and so I've been conditioned from decades of cup disappointments that all I can say is at least it wasn't against like a 3rd tier side or a 2nd tier side.
Yeah, like Leverkusen.
However, I think that actually may have it would have been better if it was a lower league side, because then Nuri Sahin probably would have been kicked out sooner. But be that as it may, yeah, I mean, that was a massive disappointment. Dortmund, in a, let's call it a normal Dortmund expectation season, you'd have to at least make the quarterfinals, though anything outside of the semifinals would be, in my estimation, for Borussia Dortmund, a disappointment.
All right, what's your estimation for the Champions League campaign? What's your rating?
I'm gonna give that a generous 7 out of 10. I think Borussia Dortmund making the quarterfinals is kind of where clubs like Dortmund tend to top out. I mean, obviously, we're coming off a season where Dortmund made the final on a crazy run. Now, they sacrificed the Bundesliga to a degree to get there. However, going out against Barcelona the way they did it's kind of frustrating because obviously the away match in Barcelona was horrendous, but they adjusted and learned and got really close. And Ben Sebaini, I really feel bad for him, with that own goal that kind of deflated everything the way it was going. I think if that hadn't happened, it would have gotten really, really tight near the end, and I wouldn't have even put a fourth goal past, Dortmund in terms of scoring it. The league portion of the season was really up and down. There were some good moments. There were some really bad moments, like falling apart against Real Madrid was not awesome, to say the least. I want to say the Bologna match was also not awesome.
There was the final nail in Nuri Sahin's coffin, which is why my rating is a 6.5.
Yeah.
Because the 10 out of 10, I think, is if you win the Champions League, since it's in the
Correct.
in the realm of
Correct.
realism for Dortmund. Champions League final, usually you'd call it a 10 out of 10. But I'm not going that far. I feel like since we could have won it last year, I want to say a 10 out of 10 rating is you actually win the Champions League. I think 7 out of 10 is really fair, but I gave minus points because not only did Dortmund really mess it up. I mean, there's no shame in losing away to Real Madrid, even after you are 2 goals up. But to fall apart like this with the coaching decisions that were made, and of course the Bologna game you just mentioned, that was just such an atrocious game to watch, and of course meant that Dortmund had to go play one extra round, which did not make matters easier. Where Dortmund had to play against Sporting then in this little qualification round for the knockout phase. So that's a couple minus points, but overall I think we can still be really happy with the Champions League campaign. Dortmund exited it with their heads held high after the 4-0 loss away to Barcelona, which I don't know. I don't know if that was sort of the condition for Barcelona not playing as well as they did in the second leg and had Dortmund pull off this great win, because after all, it was the first defeat over 90 minutes that Barcelona experienced at that point in their season. So yeah, I'm fairly happy. So Matthias, I cut you off. So if you have anything to finish on Champions League.
Yeah, I mean, I think Dortmund finishing kind of the league phase of it to have to go to that playoff was kind of my tip anyway. Regardless of Nuri Sahin or not, I'm like, yeah, that's, Dortmund being in that top 6-8, even though they were for a short period of time, and then they decided, nah, we don't really want that. I think there's nothing shameful about that. That's kind of where I expected Dortmund to end up anyway.
I know, but since they had done so well beforehand, anyway. Overall rating, I'm also the 4 out of 10. But it's rather like it's between 3 out of 10 and 4 out of 10. I don't know where you fall on your overall rating of this particular season in the end, but this is where I sort of come down.
If I average it, it comes out to a 3 out of 10. But, grading on a curve.
Well, you have to weigh the competitions also differently. I feel like averaging also doesn't do the trick. It's really hard. It's hard.
I would say 4 out of 10 is probably right. I mean, that's where the Bundesliga season is. Champions League season I thought was pretty good. The DFB Pokal is obviously the lesser of the 3 competitions. So weighing that less, I'd
that's
say
why
4
we
out
never
of 10
win
overall.
it, because we weighed so little.
Yeah. Well, compared to the Champions League and compared to the Bundesliga, I mean, imagine Dortmund would have finished 6th and, in the Champions League got knocked out by Sporting, but then got to the final of the DFB Pokal. It'd be like, oh, that's really cute, but financially, not awesome.
Yeah, so my question to you, would you trade with VfB Stuttgart, who I think finished, what was it, 10th in the end in the season?
They were 9th in the end after their glorious victory against Leipzig, which ensured Leipzig isn't playing in Europe at all. Would I trade with Stuttgart? No.
Okay. That's our answer then. that a DFB Pokal win has less...
No, I mean, why would I trade playing in the Champions League next season for... most likely playing in the Europa League next season.
You would have a trophy, assuming that Stuttgart wins the final.
You would have a trophy. I think, obviously, if Dortmund had finished the season 5th, I would have done the trade. I'm going to be rooting for Stuttgart because I really don't like Arminia Bielefeld. But overall, I'd rather be in the Champions League than not. And I think VfB Stuttgart, despite some odd euphoria there and this, that, and the other, they do have to ask their own questions about themselves. Because, compared to last season, this was definitely a letdown. But that's Stuttgart.
Yeah.
We're not talking about Stuttgart.
Different podcast. But yeah, let's come back to sort of the ailments of the season, and you talked about the things that were self-inflicted. Now, which one to you is the bigger blunder? And I think from your earlier answer, the answer is pretty clear what you're going to say, but nevertheless, I'm still going to ask you, do you think Dortmund were more plagued by their coaching hire or by their squad planning?
Coaching hire 100% without a doubt.
Do you still want to elaborate, or do you feel like you've already done?
No, I can't, because here's the thing. And I got actually kind of pissed after Dortmund beat Kiel that there were certain elements online that deem themselves also experts and media and whatever, who still trashed this Dortmund squad and saying, getting fourth is amazing given how crappy the squad is. And I vehemently disagree with that, because what Niko Kovac did was great, but Niko Kovac isn't Pep Guardiola, okay? Let's be realistic here. And this squad proved overall, now you can argue about some individual players. Overall, it's a good squad with good players. So the question, of course, then that needs to be asked is, okay, well, it's the same group of people that the other guy had, aside from two guys. I will admit that. I think especially the Daniel Svensson edition was a big boost for Dortmund. And to me, it's the coaching. It's just mistake after mistake after mistake tactically in matches, compounded with, obviously, now what we're hearing afterwards with the changes that Niko Kovac made, and also judging from what the player said, the off the pitch and the training management from Nuri Sahin and his team was subpar, because the changes that Niko Kovac made, if we take the tactical side out of it, when it comes to player management, motivation, how he conducts training, how he conducts physical fitness, that's the huge separation. That's the big difference. And you could just see it in this run. And Niko Kovac, of course, I'm going to say, had a rough start with Dortmund, but he had no preparation window. He basically had to take the squad and run with what there was and try to unfuck everything that had been screwed up previously by a well-meaning, club legend-esque player staff, coaching staff that had no fucking idea what they were doing. And so that's why, for me, it's less about players. I think, and we can obviously talk about a lot of the failings of the front office. That's very NFL term there, but of the management at Borussia Dortmund when it comes to the whole Nuri Sahin debate. When it comes to the squad overall, when you look at it, when you look at the additions that came in the summer, and when you look at the additions that came in the winter, I'll be honest, the squad that they brought together this season, not bad. Not bad at all. I mean, Anton came good, finally. I mean, there's no question that he did. He became the boss. And when Nico Schlotterbeck went down, we were all concerned. And I'm not going to say you didn't miss Nico Schlotterbeck. I think Dortmund with Nico Schlotterbeck is better than without. But he really, really stepped up. And I feel like Felix Netscher finally arrived. He had some injury issues, but he finally arrived. Much better season than the first season. Obviously, Guirassy, there's no debate that is a huge upgrade at the striker position. I mean, without a doubt and without question there. Then you bring in Svensson and Chukwuemeka, also really good upgrades. Pascal Gross, really good, bringing him in. So in terms of the squad building
I love
side,
how you just forgot about Jan Kuto, which really tells you everything we need to know
Kuto.
about this transfer so far.
I mean,
he might come good next season. You never know.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. He may be a player that needs another season because obviously the Bundesliga is different than La Liga, and he's still young, and I'm not worried about that. You know, taking now. I mean, since we talked about football, we talked about basketball. Now let's talk about baseball. You can't bat 1,000 with transfers. Like, it's just not going to happen. But the overall average is really, really good. I feel like this overall player personnel, as far as the players that they brought in, I still think they kind of bungled the Ian Matson situation. But Daniel Svensson would much lower price tag overall. Okay, I can live with that. I think Mats Hummels leaving. It's sad because it's Mats Hummels, but at the same time, Anton Schlotterbeck, now Süle coming good. I think overall player personnel wise, I don't have a ton of complaints, to be perfectly honest. It really hinges on the coaching. And I even thought about it, man, imagine if Niko Kovac would have been the coach to take over in the summer, or right at the end of the Hinrunde, and he would have had the winter break to work with these players and prep them. I think not only would Dortmund have made the Champions League way more comfortably, I think they would have been pushing Leverkusen. They definitely would have been challenging Eintracht Frankfurt. I don't think they would have been challenging for the title, but I also believe they would have gone further in the DFB Pokal had he taken over in the summer. Obviously not in the winter. The Champions League is kind of played out as the Champions League played out. Maybe they would have beaten Bologna and then things would have shifted differently. But for me, it all hinges down to the decision, or hinges upon the staff situation and the decision to go with Nuri Sahin and his team, which was the biggest fail and the biggest problem. So that's why for me, in my head, the management staff at Borussia Dortmund are both the biggest winners and the biggest losers of the season.
Yeah. I mean, we haven't really talked about all the drama yet that occurred because it wasn't only Nuri Sahin that was sacked. It was also Sven Mislintat and, of course, contract extension of Sebastian Kehl. All done, according to Ricken, to steer the club into more calm waters. So I feel like it was not only that the on-field success wasn't where it needed to be, but also we had a lot of headlines. You know, I felt oftentimes, you know, not that I honestly would think that Dortmund would be on the same trajectory as a Schalke, for example, and completely slide into mediocrity down to just sheer awfulness. However, it has not been very common overall in the last decade or so since we've doing this, or over a decade since we've been doing the show, that there are a lot of headlines in the Bild-Zeitung about sort of the intricacies and the opinions of the upper management or front office or so, and there was a lot of throwing mud via the media between sort of the acting parties. At Dortmund, we had the whole Matthias Sommer public outburst thingy. So there were a lot of things to manage through the season, and I feel like also self-inflicted to a certain extent. Because when Sven Mislintat was rehired for Dortmund, everyone knew that he is not the easiest guy to deal with, and sort of the confrontation between him and Kehl that I think Kehl obviously ultimately won, since Sven Mislintat is no longer employed by Borussia Dortmund. But I think that was also a big distraction to, I think, the word Kriegsschauplatz, something that I don't have a direct translation for as of right now. but was a big problem. But also, like you said, for me, I think we can talk about the squad planning too. I think it wasn't perfect. I think Dortmund did want to get Ryan Cherky at the summer. They tried to get him in the winter. Both did not come off. I don't think Dortmund should have taken Sabitzer into the next season if they bring in Pascal Groß, and I'm still not 100% sure about Felix Metscher, to be honest. I still feel like Dortmund need a better number 8, and there wasn't really a great number 6. I don't know if Sabitzer would ever play that role, but yeah. In the end, I'm okay with the Metscher Groß partnership, but I still feel like the central positions is where Dortmund could improve. I also wasn't entirely happy with the fullback situation going into the season. I feel like Dortmund could have done more there. They did correct that in the winter, and they did it really in style, because I think we can all be very happy that Svensson is probably going to be a reliable fullback on our left side for years to come. So I'm very happy for that. I'm also happy that in the end Niko Kovac managed to build a backline that worked, with Bensebaini slotting in for Schlotterbeck and so on and so forth. But I still feel like Dortmund probably should have had another center back for the sake of depth, especially in the beginning of the season, because to me it did not feel like this squad was adequately equipped for the load, especially at the start of the season with the Champions League phase and so many games. And yeah, it was not a surprise that so many injuries happened. But again, I don't even fully put down the injury crisis on just the lack of squad depth that we may or may not have had. I also feel like that coincides with Nuri Sahin being the coach, because I think he has completely mishandled the fitness levels of Borussia Dortmund, and Opta has posted a nice little chart about Dortmund's running distance. And so the average distance run by Niko Kovac, or rather by Borussia Dortmund under Niko Kovac, is 118.2 kilometers to Sahin's 114.5. And in the last 8 games, which were obviously the best run, Dortmund were leading the league with 120.3 kilometers on average. And before, like I said, it was 114.6. In those other 26, that really shows you how poor Dortmund were in terms of fitness. And just to see that the where's the chart here, where the distance run chart, if you will, the league table, Dortmund between match day 1 and 26, Dortmund were in 16th place. Only Wolfsburg and Bochum ran less. And in the last final 8 days, like match days, as I already said, Dortmund were first, and almost by a whole kilometer better than Union Berlin, who had 119.3 kilometers run on average, versus Dortmund's, like I said, 120.3. So that is to say, I honestly feel like Dortmund's ability to play football consistently well in the first half of the season, mostly under Nuri Sahin, was really harmed by getting the preseason and the conditioning all wrong. I mean, Dortmund took, I think, until the second half of the season for them to finally string 2 league wins back to back. If I remember correctly, I mean, we had back-to-back wins between the Bundesliga and Champions League games, but there was never really any consistency, and I feel like it really came all crashing down in the final weeks of Nuri Sahin's tenure. I mean, we had this 3-2 loss in Leverkusen, then one of the most embarrassing losses, the 4-2 loss away to Kiel, then another 2-0 loss in Frankfurt, and then of course the loss in Bologna with the little bit of a break in between, as you already talked about. And so, Matthias, to me, that is sort of probably also the biggest blunder, is to hire Nuri Sahin. We've talked about it when he was hired a lot. It did not feel to me that this decision was made on merit. And so I have to commend Dortmund for correcting it, but like you also said, in my book, it was also far too late and something that should have never happened in the first place. And really is a head scratcher to me how this came about in the first place. I mean, I'm still not entirely convinced that Edin Terzic on his own accord left Dortmund and wasn't pushed out in one way or another. I don't know. What are your thoughts on the whole transition from Terzic to Sahin? Because to me, it's still nonsensical.
Yeah, I mean, I don't understand it. I mean, if, Edin Terzic was basically like, I'm tired, I'm out, I don't have nothing left in the tank. Sure, fine. I mean, he definitely deserved it. I mean, he won the DFB Pokal in a season that he had to salvage. He almost won the Bundesliga and he almost won the Champions League. I mean, almost doesn't matter, but he definitely deserved that. But then one of the big criticisms, of course, with Terzic was too defensive, too cautious, too conservative. We need more expansive, more attractive, better football. And they thought, well, Nuri Sahin, which is an interesting way to go with that. And he had some, how do I say this? He had some good ideas. His theories were okay, but you can't abandon basics of football and you cannot abandon defense. And then everything else that kind of goes with it. I don't understand hiring Nuri Sahin when, you would say, I remember there was always that discussion, well, who else are you going to get? Well, apparently Niko Kovac. And apparently he can do a really good job. And I think a lot of us, myself included, had our opinions of Niko Kovac kind of tainted by the weird Bayern tenure when he was there.
And the even weirder Wolfsburg tenure, to be honest.
And Wolfsburg, yes. But we also can't forget those are two deeply toxic clubs.
Unlike Dortmund, who are...
No, not on that level. They're not on the Bayern level when it comes to extreme drama, especially at that time. If you remember, that time was kind of, even for Bayern level, was pretty crazy. And Niko Kovac kind of just did the best he could with what he had, and did quite well. Wolfsburg are just a head scratcher club, to be honest, because they don't know how to squad build. But then I had to think back to his time, why he even got to where he did. And that was, of course, with the Croatian national team, where he did quite well. And then more specifically, Eintracht Frankfurt. All the success that Frankfurt have had, now going to, qualifying for the Champions League, through the league phase for the first time, winning the Europa League. The foundation of that was built by Niko Kovac, and when he won the DFB Pokal with them. Like, the foundation was there, built by this man. He is a good coach. And we're, especially the German media, which loves to be overly cynical and arrogant and looking down upon people from a higher echelon, really like to crap on people. And they did that a lot with Niko Kovac. And I include myself in the sense that I was susceptible to it because my view of him got tainted by those two stints in particular. I don't pay attention to Ligue 1, so I don't know how he was perceived in France at Monaco. But he's obviously a good coach. I mean, the turnaround proves he is a good coach. I don't think anybody can argue that point because of where he picked up Borussia Dortmund and what he did with it. And that demonstrates how colossally bad the hiring of Nuri Sahin was, because it was able to be course corrected within a season with no prep time to do the course correction. And that shows that the foundation was there to have a very successful season, but because you were so far behind by the time you had a coach in who knew what he was doing, that at all hinges upon that Nuri Sahin decision that I do not understand.
Yeah, so I have a linguistic question for you, because when Lars Ricken, I think it was the 1909 talk, it's sort of a joint talk show between Radio 91.2, which is like the local radio station, Dortmund, and Ruhrnachrichten, who are, one of the local newspapers. And in that talk, he talked about sort of the difference between Niko Kovac and Nuri Sahin, and the word he used was Vermittlungskompetenz, where he explained that any coach, of course, wants their team to run, wants to play, then the players to play defense and do all the basics and have all the intrinsic motivation and whatnot. But obviously, in hindsight, we can very clearly see that Nuri Sahin's message, for whatever reason, did not come through to the players, and somehow Niko Kovac managed to get through into the thick skulls of even the Karim Adeyemi, because we remember Mike Tolberg had to sub off Karim Adeyemi in Heidenheim when after the coaching change, even Adeyemi was still sort of not playing to the level he was required to do, and obviously that really turned around later. We all know the Adeyemi quote after the Leverkusen game, saying that Niko Kovac managed to kick everybody in up the butt, more or less. So Matthias, how would you describe the word Vermittlungskompetenz yourself? Because I am just blanking on that right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's communication skill. I mean, it's being able to translate theory into practice. And I mean, we've all seen that. If you work professionally, you have managers who are able to easily explain even complex things, and you have those people who can't. Break it all the way down. Look at a board game. You have people who read the rules and try to explain the rules, and you have no idea what the game is about. And then you have people who simply know how to do it. And I think a lot of that it's obviously personality driven. So some people can and some people can't. And the other one is just experience. And that experience comes specifically from coaching and understanding that it's going from the pitch to coaching immediately doesn't give you that competence. And that is the step that Nuri Sahin is missing. You look at coaches like Xabi Alonso, you look at a coach like Pep Guardiola. Who did they coach first? The kids. Xabi Alonso was the B team at Real Sociedad. And then Pep Guardiola is the B team at Barcelona. And if you can make kids understand complex things, you should be able to translate that to adults. And I think that's also why Terzic was able to do it to his degree, because he came also from the youth coaching side. Kovac, of course, just has a lot of experience, whereas Nuri Sahin had no experience. He was thrown in the deep end in Turkey, where he was a player, and they say, you be a coach, and somehow it worked out. Now you can say, well, that's kind of the same trajectory that Jürgen Klopp took, but Jürgen Klopp didn't go from a season and a half at Mainz struggling to becoming Borussia Dortmund coach. Like, he had to prove his worth and his value and his ability to do what he did. And Jürgen Klopp is a completely different personality. I think there it's a personality doesn't trump experience, but it definitely helps. Whereas with Nuri Sahin, he just lacks the experience completely. And I think that's really comes down to, I don't know what he was like as a communicator on the pitch. I would assume he was pretty good since he was captain also. Obviously, he wasn't good at shooting penalties, but that has nothing to do with anything. I just
a little side swipe that popped into your head. Yeah,
I can't help it, because God, that was so comical for those seasons.
Yeah, for those who don't remember, Borussia Dortmund, the first club championship they won, they managed to win without converting a single penalty, and Nuri Sahin was a big reason why they didn't manage to score from the penalty spot whatsoever. Now, in fairness,
that'll always be there.
He did score one.
True.
But then Wolfgang Stark happened, so that was what called back because someone somewhere ran into the penalty area, and the penalty had to be retaken, and then of course it was missed. So that's a little bit of lore and why Matthias is referencing it. For those who
and
became Dortmund fans a little later than that.
Yeah, and sorry about that, but it's just when I think Nuri Sahin, I just think no penalties. But at the end of the day, it comes down to two things. Like you said, merit. I'm a big fan of meritocracy and merit-based hirings and promotions. And two, experience. You need experience to be successful. You simply do. Unless you are that one in X million geniuses out there, which, hate to tell you this, kids, odds are you're not one of them. And Nuri Sahin is not one of them. And so that's where that's needed. And Niko Kovac has a ton of experience, good and bad. And I will always say, I'm always a proponent of the absolute fact you learn more through your mistakes than through your successes. And Niko Kovac has made mistakes. He has lost jobs. I mean, every coach kind of does. It's kind of the thing you do, unless you're Jürgen Klopp or Pep Guardiola. But overall, Nuri Sahin didn't have any of that. He had no experience to draw from, no failures to draw from. It just wasn't there, and that's why I simply do not understand. Like, if you're Schalke and you hire someone like Nuri Sahin, sure, why not? Go for it. Take a punt. Literally, what's the worst that could happen at this point? But if you're Borussia Dortmund, who came off of 2 seasons where you almost won the Bundesliga and you almost won the Champions League, your demands must be higher. They simply have to be higher. And to think that Nuri Sahin can meet your minimum expectations, let alone exceed them, you are delusional. And I think, I use this term with my kids because it makes them chuckle, but it drives the point home. You're sniffing your own farts too much. And it's like, no, you got to get out of your own echo chamber. You got to get out of your room and understand that is not what a top club does. And that's the simple truth of it. I think it was a certain arrogance because you almost got the biggest prizes with Edin Terzic, but Edin Terzic has more experience than Nuri Sahin. And so it's not even comparable. And I would say Edin Terzic didn't even have the baggage of being a really good player and feeling like there's a certain, I don't even know. I'm not going to say arrogance that comes with it, but top level football players tend to have a certain level of arrogance about them that Edin Terzic clearly did not. And so it was just so misguided. It was so, I don't want to say naive, because these are top level professionals also at the front office level. They've been through some of this stuff and they have some guidance.
But have they though? Because Ricken and Kiel are obviously also relatively
but they have
new.
guidance. No, but Stefan, they have guys. They have Matthias Sammer there and they have Aki Watzke there. And you can't tell me Michael Zorc isn't a phone call away. And so to me, it's like there's naivete there and there's also some stupidity and arrogance. And I would say you combine all of those 3 things, they learned the lesson the hard way and almost learned it at a very expensive level, had they not made the Champions League. And so they've course corrected now. And now I feel Dortmund are in a actually very good place heading into next season. Obviously, we need to see what happens player-wise, but as far as staff goes, I feel Dortmund are in a very good position, and we can't forget former Dortmund player is also an assistant coach in Robert Kovac, who's Niko Kovac's brother, of course. So there is some Stallgeruch, some, stable smell, translating that with Robert Kovac, who did play for Dortmund at one time. So now, if you're going to ask me, how do I feel about next season? Am I optimistic, on level, or pessimistic? I will go with optimistic because things have been proven out, and players are showing a level of confidence that they lacked for 6 months.
Yeah, that was going to be my question, actually. That was exactly going to be my question, because we've now talked a little bit too long, I think, about Nuri Sahin and beating that horse a little bit there.
Fair enough. That Stallgeruch is dead.
Yeah. Yeah, that horse did not survive its stable. Let's just say it that way. But yeah, I'm honest. My confidence level in Sebastian Kehl is still not at 100%. I feel like obviously it's not been helpful that Dortmund qualified for the Champions League so late, which of course means that the planning for the next season is a little bit different. However, I feel like Dortmund probably could have already announced a transfer here and there, but I'm not entirely sure. They're obviously chasing Joe Bellingham right now, who still has to play the playoff for the Premier League promotion, and of course Ryan Cherky is also on their radar. I'm not entirely sure if either transfer is going to be realistic, but I think Dortmund are pushing for a new number 10 to replace Julian Brandt, who came good at the end of the season, but overall did not have a very good season. And obviously we've talked about it a lot on the show. Will Dortmund make maybe the mistake of having their recency bias and looking at sort of only the good times and make most decisions from that, or will they analyze the entire season and see what's wrong and react to that also? Because I think there are a few changes that need to be made. Like I said, I still would like some upgrades in center midfield. Obviously with Jamie Gittens probably heading out, with Gio Reyna leaving the club, but also, getting Sebastian Aller and Yusuf Moukoko off your wage bill, etc. There are certainly decisions to be made, and a lot of contracts are running or expiring rather in 2026. And of course, Gregor Kobel being cagey in an interview about his future is also another thing that could pop up. And of course, one thing that annoys me also, and obviously has to do with Nuri Sahin, as we talked about before, but maybe not entirely, is the intrinsic motivation of this team. Is it really where it needs to be to be on the level of ambition where Dortmund are? Because I think in recent years we've had it too often that Dortmund sort of waste their season in the first half of the season, then go on a run in the second half of the season, but by then it's usually too late to really make a big challenge for the Bundesliga. Obviously, this season Bayern finished on 83 points, so Dortmund's record points tally in their second championship win under Jürgen Klopp was 81, which at the time was a Bundesliga record, but obviously has been pulverized by the Pep Guardiola Bayern team. And Heinkes Bayern, I think, too, later on. I don't know if Leverkusen set a new record last season in their unbeaten streak or not. I haven't really looked that up. But either way, I think Dortmund have to get very serious about where their real ambitions are. And I don't know if this team has that in them. I mean, the run we just had, winning 7 out of 8 games, was great, but I don't know if this is sort of something they can replicate at the beginning of the season, because we now have the Club World Cup and another complicated summer preparation. So my question really for the front office, as you just said, Matthias, is whether they can actually build a squad that can challenge for the top of the league, which is something that I expect from a team like Borussia Dortmund, considering they are the second richest team in the league, and they have some more cash infusions thanks to the Club World Cup. And I think Champions League quarter-final run also paid them handsomely, and now that they have also qualified for next season's Champions League and that is also very important due to the coefficient they are in pot 1, so they should have a somewhat more favorable draw, so chances of them making another deep-ish run are not low. I think that is also something worth mentioning. but this is sort of my question. Even in the almost championship winning season under Edin Terzic, I did not have the feeling that this particular Dortmund team was so great. It was also more of a case of Bayern really having a down season, but I want this Dortmund team to have an entirely different ambition. And so my question is, was the final run that they had also sort of, being the deadline of almost missing out on the minimum requirement was that more of a motivator than overall going into the season right from the start and saying we want to win the league and we have the team to do it and or at least challenge Bayern? Because obviously it's maybe a little bit too much to ask to say we want to build a team that's the outright favorite to win, but I think Dortmund should be contenders and should be in the mix, and especially with the resources that this club has right now, they are being squandered quite a lot, and I would like a return to making, going in the other direction and maybe overperforming a little bit here and there. Now, obviously, Dortmund are not a super team, like, for example, Bayern, so when they have really good players, retaining them and building a long-lasting squad around that is probably never going to happen, but that being said, I still feel like if a Leverkusen can win the league, then Dortmund should be able to do that too, and like I said, that should be the overall ambition, and I'm still a little bit not fully optimistic if the tandem of Kehl and Ricken can deliver that for us. I don't know, because you just talked about the optimism. I don't know if Dortmund can take that momentum from the second half or maybe the last 8 games of this season into the new season and really build on that or not. But this is just sort of my feeling right now, that I'm still a bit skeptical.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that made me skeptical initially was obviously the Nuri Sahin thing. I think now with Niko Kovac, I'm not really concerned about that. As far as player personnel goes, overall, I would say the last 2 seasons, the transfers have actually been pretty good, with a lot of players coming good now, both some that they brought in this season and some they brought in last season. But there is a lot to do this summer. Like you said, there are a lot of open question marks. I mean, I think Niklas Süle, they need to restructure his contract, but, Niko Kovac, return Niklas Süle. Bensebaini, it sounds like he's probably going to want to leave, which is okay. It's a hard position to replace, but you figure something out there. Kobel, I think, is the big question mark, but we already talked about that, I want to say like a couple of months ago, that if somebody comes in with 70, 80, 100 million euro offer for Gregor Kobel, given all the backup keepers with Alex Maya and then the one whose name escapes me right now, who's out on loan right now, I'd probably take that money because you can invest it in other places. I think Özcan is probably leaving. I saw he's being linked with coming back to Köln. I think Emre Can's future is very much in doubt because, man, he didn't really feature in the run-in now towards the end of the season under Niko Kovac.
I mean, it should be. Emre Can is overpaid. Simple as that.
I agree, and he's 31 going on 32. This is now when you start usually tanking, especially players that are very physical like him.
I mean, the good news for Emre Can this season is that he was, in the end, playing mostly as a center.
True.
Which really helped him, because I don't think he's a good central midfielder. But again, that was also...
And he did okay.
Yeah, but the squad planning going into the season was that Emre Can was one of our central midfielders. And this is just something I wholeheartedly disagree with. And we call that Altlasten. Just something that we sort of schlepp into the new season as well. I think Emre Can, as good as he has been from the penalty spot and as good as he has been as a center backup, if you will, he is paid starter money. He is not a starter in my book. He is not good enough to be a central midfielder, period, and I don't think he is good enough to be a starting center back for Dortmund, considering all the other options we have when you consider Anton, Schlotterbeck, and Süle. I think they're all 3 of those are ahead of him, and So obviously, if you have him as a backup, that's great, but just not for the money he is being paid. So when you talk about restructuring Süle's deal, I can see giving Emre Can also a more performance-based contract, let's say, if he clearly accepts that he is A, probably no longer the club captain, and B, is not going to play as much, considering that naturally there are better players for the positions that I just mentioned. If we play with a back three, then I think we certainly need players, and talked about squad depth. I still would like to have Emre Can around for that reason, but overall, I'd probably go into a different direction of saying it was a great time. In parentheses, maybe not really. But then also say, let's look for younger center backs that can maybe, be sort of the, I don't know. Do you say undergird? I don't know, but so something to grow and develop in the background instead of paying him like top end money.
No, I mean, for sure, if he's going to stick around, you have to restructure the contract. I think there's also a big question mark behind Zabitzer. Granted, he played quite well on the weekend. Julian Brandt, you already mentioned. Gio Reyna, I'd like to drive him away from Dortmund myself, if I could. I'll pay for the Uber. I think Gittins, we know, wants to leave. So there's plenty to do there. But the thing is, looking at how people are playing, I think the starting center pairing in midfield is Gross and Mecha. I mean, that's without a doubt. And that's where I think Chukwuemeka, who I do believe Dortmund want to hold. I think the Bellingham situation will dictate a lot of these things. So you'd have a young, dynamic player there. And then with Chukwuemeka, if you can hold on to him, he can fulfill that kind of Brandt type role as well. So there's going to be plenty of cash coming in for players. So Dortmund, and obviously they're going to be cash rich thanks to Champions League qualification, their performance in the Champions League, their position in the Bundesliga overall, and then of course the Club World Cup. So there's plenty of opportunity to do stuff there. And we'll kind of wait and see. Again, overall, I think the player personnel moves over the last 2 seasons overall have been good, given that they couldn't completely overhaul everything at once. But in a step-by-step approach, this is kind of the season. Next season is the season that'll make or break Sebastian Kehl's future at the club, in my opinion. They bring in a few good players, like they have done. And I think then, and you work with a Niko Kovac, and you are not in threat of not making the Champions League. Now, whether you are pushing to win the title or not, that's a different story. But at least you're not in threat of losing your income. I think then we'll kind of move on and look ahead from there. But there are clearly areas that need to be addressed. So the next few weeks and couple of months are going to be very, very interesting.
Yeah, for sure. So again, next week we'll have our Yellow Wall Pod season awards. But then I think very quickly we can also talk a little bit more about the players that need to leave and arrive. Because I think it would not be detrimental if Dortmund hang on to the system that they've been playing under Kovac recently with a back three. I think the Süle, Anton, and Schlotterbeck combination in your sort of theoretical starting 11 is really good, because you learn from that you have a lot of build-up capabilities, which you must have, because I still feel like even between Mecha and Pascal Groß, there are still some deficiencies, even though they are both okay in that department. I think I'm still having Riosson and Svensson as my number one wing backs. To be honest, I don't know what the development of Jan Koto is going to be in the second year. Maybe that is going to be good. And then of course in midfield, I think you need to replace Julian Brandt adequately, and then sort of a striking duo, if you will, of Adeyemi and Girassi is still my preferred option. But that being said, I'm also a big fan of Maxi Bayer by now. Took him a while to get going, but he has also shown that he can be a good replacement for either Adeyemi or Girassi, because I think the Adeyemi Bayer tandem works really well. He also works extremely well next to Girassi. And if you then manage to also develop Diranville a little bit further, I think Dortmund can go far. But obviously they will also have to bolster their depth a little bit more if they were to lose a Jamie Gittens and such. And of course Sabitzer, who I would not continue with, is also a player you need to sort of replace, but I feel like this is maybe a chance to go more also in the direction of youthful players that have more potential to develop, because Sabitzer overall I don't think has made us better or worse. If you look at his tenure, I mean, this season was just not good for him. First of all, he was played out of position by Nuri Sahin, having to play on a wing, which made zero sense, and then he was injured for a long time. So yeah, he played okay in Leverkusen. He played okay against Kiel, but I also feel like he is overpaid for what we get from him. And again, he's not going to raise his market value or do much for Dortmund, because I don't think he's going to be a starter unless, I don't know. Do you see him as Dortmund's natural number 10 going forward? I don't, and he's getting paid starter money. So I feel like that's also something that needs to change.
Agreed.
All right. Then I assume you want to watch the Europa League final now.
I feel like I kind of have to. I don't know if I want to.
All right. Thank you very much for coming on. Again, send us your categories for the season awards in the YouTube comments for next week. Until then, as always, thank you for listening and goodbye.